Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Today on Expedition Networking, we have Carole Stizza. She is a senior HR professional and professionally certified executive coach, and she's written a book called The Ask Framework: Questions that Elevate Your Influence, Performance, and Leadership. Carole, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Now, I want to, for those listening, I want to just kind of give a little backstory here. I'll let you take it at some point. But we probably met at one point in the 80s because your husband played rugby with my brother at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It just goes to show you how small of a world this is. Brian Parton introduced us, who's a mutual friend who also played rugby, and somebody I met on LinkedIn, and then just realized that he had played rugby with my brother. But anyhow, your husband was in the Air Force and bounced around as most Air Force people do all over the place, and you bounced around with him, and then became a mom, and then decided, you know what, it's time for me. And so now you've become this author, professional speaker, executive coach, so on and so forth. So I really want to kind of get at this journey and, how it came about, and talk about your book, and then talk about, what you're doing and how people can help you. So tell me your story.
Well, I'll kind of start where you did, getting to meet your brother and quite a few other amazing people who then married and have a very tight group of friends. In fact, we're having a reunion this October. Rugby actually creates a very tight community. So does the military. So on that note, we stayed in the military for 26 years, moving around the United States, and my husband traveled internationally, and I got to beautifully have a family. But I always worked. I always was either working part-time, full-time, mainly because that extra income helped fund all of our children's lovely sports ambitions, their art aspirations, anything a child wants to do outside of the norm, that was always helpful. And I would say majority of those roles now fall underneath the HR umbrella. So I do hold credentials within the HR world. And a lot of that time I spent naturally, organically coaching. So when the opportunity came to concentrate on what I really wanted to do, I got to fulfill a lifelong dream of going back to graduate school, and gained the degree of applied industrial organizational psychology, which is the research of how people work better together. And I stepped out on my own in 2013, because in 2012, I had this very unusual diagnosis of stage 3 cancer that was very unexpected. And so coming out the other side of that, the title, all of the ambition I had going into my graduate school, that kind of changed. Time became my currency. And I set out on my own as HR consultant and found that I ended up coaching leaders of multi-million-dollar organizations in how they communicated, how they led, how they set expectations. So at one point I looked back, and I do have a coaching certification. I have those credentials, but at one point all I was doing was coaching executives. Mm-hmm. And half of them were people who were stepping into the C-suite, moving from operational to strategic thinking. And oftentimes they were such a rock star operationally, they didn't know how to make that transition to strategic. And that the same occurred for the other half, where they had originated their own company, they were the owner, but they had spent so much time operationally making it work that at some point when they needed to be strategic, they didn't know how to delegate out and trust and build those layers of necessary leaders between the frontline employee with a client and their needed knowledge, whether it was for themselves or their board, backers, etc. So the book that I just launched this week, actually, this is brilliant timing, was started out based on the negativity around feedback, because we all need it, we all want it, but we're only prepared to continually ask for ways to improve instead of assessing and balancing the mental ledger of what are we currently doing well that we need to honor and not screw up when we go to introduce new change, grow, scale, even when you're looking to scale your company and your employees. So that research actually morphed into a whole lot more than I expected. And I found that if we were to kind of flip feedback on its head, and instead of waiting for it, understand how to go out and control what we get when we get it so that we know how to use it. That was a whole different ballgame that no one was prepared for and no one is advocating for. But yet the research was brilliant in identifying why we need to do it and why it matters. So that's how I got from where you and I may have met on a rugby pitch,
right,
probably sharing a beer and mingling with the other people also on the pitch and the audience, to now getting to meet on a more professional setting where you have your own amazing business built based on networking, and where I get to come in and join you and help your audience know that there are ways to ask really cool questions, to get really rich information, to get to know one another on a deeper level faster, especially when you're networking and wanting to grow professionally.
A couple things. I do want to touch on the book. We're generally about 60 days between recording and release. So people, it's out there. It's out there.
Totally fine. It'll be out there for a long time.
Go find it. But I do want to come back to the book. I guess the question that's been that just hit me: to what extent have you been able to tap into your network? I mean, it's people. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I know so many people that were born here. I tease them. It's like there's like a tether. They can't go anywhere outside of 25 miles from the city, and they stay here. And there's certainly advantages to that because they really go deep in with the area and their network is all here. But I would imagine there's advantages to what you did as well, because, well, I know my brother's got a very professional business. Brian Parton's, he's an entrepreneur. These guys aren't just military people who just retired and did nothing.
Right.
But you're tapped into all of that, I assume.
Well, so yes. So I came from a very tiny hometown, and there are a lot of my friends who never left either. And so there's value in everybody knowing everybody's business, because you have this trusted community that looks out for each other. The brilliant thing about then moving into the military family was it's a wide world of military connections, so that our network of friends spans countries and continents. The interesting thing about whether you come from a small town or you're in a military family with wide-reaching fingers, we all still stay connected via the internet. When the internet really started coming to life for all of us in early mid 1990s, I think we actually still have hanging out there our original AOL address that we kept because our military friends would always try that one first. We could stay connected. And now that we have the ability to network on LinkedIn and on other social media fronts, your personal friends that you have a trust with, that you've spent personal space together and memories in your life, you do stay together, and then they share your information with people that they know. So you have this brilliant opportunity to expand. That being said, when it comes to doing something personal, like you're starting a business, you're scaling your business and looking for talent and you're open to them being remote, or you're launching a book, it takes the people who have the time, the mental space, and they connect with what you're doing that step up to be that core network. And it changes for different topics and purposes. The reason I present it that way is that in your network and in my network, we all know entrepreneurs. But we also know people who are in an organization wanting to stay professionally connected for personal reasons or hobbies, or just to keep their network healthy and growing so they have options. And then there are people who step into writing a book or sharing something personal with their life. And the same people who like you and love you are going to be able to fit only in one of those things at any one time. So you can't always expect your whole network to be your whole network all the time. Right. And that was a very valuable lesson I've gotten to learn stepping into my own business, stepping into staying connected with people I knew before, and now doing the book. So when I asked for people to be on a book launch team, for example, about 50 people stepped up saying, I have the space to do this. There are other people I know that says, I can't wait to buy it, or congratulations. And you can't take any of that doesn't show up personally. And I love that about networking, is that what somebody is willing to do and personally offer, whether it's to meet you for networking or connect you to someone they know, it's because they have the space to do it in that moment. It's not whether or not they like you or don't like you a lot of the times. And I think we have a tendency to take it too personally if somebody can't do it, and that's not fair to them. So the network is a multi-layered, beautiful recipe of very rich relationships that get to morph with you all the time.
Yeah, I use the analogy. It's kind of like that junk drawer in your kitchen. I mean, there's just well, that's probably not totally fair. I had somebody
not very complimentary. Now, come on.
No, it's not. But I connected with a guy. I interviewed him on the podcast, but he's a former Catholic priest, and he's created this network of former Catholic priests. And he says, if you happen to know any former Catholic priests, I would love to meet them. And that's just like, I looked at him and I just, I'm like, I do. I do know too. And for all, I told him, I said, I've just for the longest time thought these are like just little two odds and ends in the back of the junk drawer, but behind that old wallet. I've never known what to do with these guys, and now I have a purpose for them to help you. But no, you're right. We have all these, different. It is maybe not a junk drawer, but it's certainly a toolbox of people that we can turn to and rely on for various things. And I just think it's neat that you have them scattered. We all have communities. Mm-hmm. Yours is pretty much all over the world.
Yes.
Including your little hometown, wherever that's at.
LaPorte, Texas. LaPorte, Texas is way down in the bottom part of Texas. They get hit with hurricanes about as often as Florida half the time. But yeah, I grew up there, stay connected. It's been a very rich life to have come from the comfort of a hometown to the expanded comfort of a military family. And so I'm not as scared to step out on my own as a lot of people who may need to leave their hometown.
Right.
That's the wild west, it feels like. But it doesn't make it any easier. I'm just a little braver sometimes because I had to do it at the beginning, and we had to move. And we moved often enough that I know how to move really well. What I'm finding, that the other side of that coin, because there's always another side, is that we move so often, I didn't put down deeper roots. And so now that we've stopped moving, it's a step out. And now with an aim of creating deeper roots for people who aren't in the military. Military people create roots thick and as deep as we can get in the short amount of time we have. And half of them take root forever, and half of them just are very short-term plans. Never less rich, just sometimes shorter versus longer. And now I'm needing to really network, and I'm probably where I'm going to stay for a very long time. And so I get to do it with a different lens. And that's new for me.
Yeah.
That is really new for me. It's a new adventure.
No, I think that's interesting. I never really thought of that perspective. Because again, back to my friends here in Columbus, or your friends in LaPorte, they're wonderful people, but your friends in LaPorte, they're like, you know what, they know that they're going to be there.
Yeah.
Right. And so their approach to relationships are totally different. Whereas when you're at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, or any of the others, umpteen stops along the way between there and here, you're probably thinking, okay, you know what? I'm not going to go as deep with this person, however that is defined, because I just don't know that it's worth the investment. I don't know if they're that long-term person, or that person that as soon as I'm gone, I'm out of their life. It would just be a unique perspective.
Well, and it's almost the opposite of what you said. We get deep fast. We're not petty. We get deep. We ask personal questions quick. In the military, we got personal fast because we knew we needed to depend on each other. And I needed to know if you were going to be there. If you weren't, fine. Just tell me now. It was a lot. As the men are trained, the men and women, excuse me, because I have amazing female military friends. As the military member is trained to cohesively work in a team, life and death, whether it's space, whether it's in an admin office, or you're truly on the front lines, you assume that you have my back. The spouses assume the same of the other spouse. If our husbands are working together, we're working together. If our husbands are in the military together, if your wife and my husband in the military together, then but there was no hanky panky. There was never compromised intentions. It was like, we're in this together too.
Yeah.
We'd watch each other's kids. We'd watch each other's pets. We just didn't question your integrity as much as sometimes I tend to do on the outside, because we don't have a common employment. Of course, the military is so transparent, you know what everybody gets paid to. I mean, we take all the weird things that people judge each other by on the outside of the military. In the military, it's just check the box. We got
right.
it. And so transitioning outside of the military to people who've never done that, never had something, never lived that life, either I can come across as way too personal too fast, or because I might hold back, I can be shy or aloof. And so it's an interesting new adventure to be who I am and not worry about what other people think or say, and still ask the best questions I can to get to know them. And we both can assess where we get to continue forward together, or where we can refer each other to someone better.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to dovetail over to your book on questions.
Yeah.
And just, I guess, open the door for you to really kind of talk about that. And I don't want you to give it away. I want people to buy your damn book. But just, I guess, a couple minutes on, really what people can expect, what the value it would bring somebody to have.
So the book's intention is to give you a tangible framework of 4 pieces of a conversation that you can use as a template. You can count them on your fingers, so that you can think on your feet and have a very professional conversation and make the other person look good in the process. You'll automatically look good doing it, but by the way you include them into it, they feel seen, heard, and valued, and that automatically levers up your influence. It also provides a way for you to ask better questions, that you can gain a piece of information about your own performance. So for a leader who is not used to going and asking for their own feedback from either their team or their peers, this actually allows them a framework to say, hey, based on the last quarter, what has been the most effective part of my leadership that has mattered to you, right? Oh, my apologies. Thought that was on silent.
That's okay. It's a podcast.
It's a podcast. I love it. Life happens. And
Yeah.
it happens. And then asking for an example of how that other person experienced it is something that no one is allowing people to understand they have permission to do. And then there's ways to continue that conversation. And I've used references from people in the FBI, people in hostage negotiation. What do we find are the best questions to ask when you're really trying to keep somebody engaged and yet moving forward, not going backwards? So performance and leadership take on a whole new ball game when you can ask better questions to gain information that's useful and allows there to be a really rich conversation without drama, without people getting defensive, without there being blame, and nuanced. We don't need any more of that. That's it. There's enough of that hanging out on the outside.
Yeah.
That when you're trying to step into really creating good relationships, you need to know how to do that and get away from it. And this was the intention. How it started was because I had one of those surprise performance reviews. Many of us go into a performance review and you get told how you're a rock star, how everything's going great. Yay, check the box and you leave. There's going to be one that takes you by surprise. And it may have nothing to do with you. It could be everything to do with the other person giving the review. They've had a bad day. They didn't prepare. They don't know what you really do. Doesn't matter. But when you have that one and you realize how ill-equipped you are with information about what you are doing right to bring that around to make lemonade out of lemons, that's when you realize I haven't been asking the right questions. I don't know what other people think about my performance on the team or with them. I wasn't prepared to step into this conversation and make it a conversation instead of just a receivership.
Right. That's good. Questions are the answer. I'm a big fan of getting other people to talk. And this is a whole different nuance of the usefulness of that. Let's talk about your business, and then how people can get a hold of you.
Sure.
What you're looking for, what your types of things you're doing, who your targets are.
Sure. So when I get to work with clients, the majority of my clients are in a leadership role, whether they're either a new leader, they're emergent leader, they're really wanting to get the C-suite, or they're in the C-suite and challenges have presented themselves in a way that you're feeling out of focus. The great thing about being an executive type of coach is my niche is in leadership perspectives, communicating so that everybody starts to understand a win-win proposition, and that you start to really understand. It sounds cliche to say legacy, so I'm going to rephrase it. What do you want people to brag about when you're not in the room? Whether you just left the room and you're going to be there for the next 10 to 15 years, or you are thinking about part-time retirement, what do you want people to brag about when they're describing you? And we don't think about it that way. We think about accomplishments and credentials and all these awards. And I'm like, those don't matter. Nobody on their deathbed says, I wish I worked more.
Right.
It's relationships that matter, and what you left in the wake of people working with you. You want them to be better off for being with you. So I work with those people who want that focus. Not everybody's there. A lot of people are just scrambling and running and checking off the box they think they need to be there until they can think straight. And they need to know that coaching is a secret weapon. People who are at the top have coaches. They just don't tell you about it because they don't want to give away their own secret weapon half the time.
Right.
But yeah, coaching is a secret weapon to help you be more objective. So how to get a hold of me is LinkedIn. So Carole with an E and Stizza with two Z's, Stizza. It looks like pizza, but it's not. I married into that Sicilian name. Oh, of course, I've been spelling it for a long time. But LinkedIn is a great place to play together professionally. I have a website, relevant-insight.com. amspirit.com. And I've co-authored 2 books, and I finally produced my own solo book that's on Amazon. Just look up the Ask Framework, and it should pop up for you.
Sounds great. I will get the I will get your website in the show notes, and well, obviously your name as well. So I do appreciate your time. This has been great.
Well, Mike, it's always great to be able to talk at this level of networking, because I really admire all that you do to connect people. And so it's always an honor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
To wrap things up, remember, we're looking for some enterprising business types to join our team as franchisees of AmSpirit Business Connections. Our franchisees work with entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals in their area to help them become more successful through networking and the exchange of quality business referrals in a structured weekly morning meeting. This is a unique franchise opportunity, you see, because these meetings are in the morning. A successful business type or professional can add this franchise opportunity onto what they're already doing. Again, all of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, these franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections model. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. The wonderful thing is that not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating the AmSpirit Business Connections model, but the business networks that they build and develop become a great source of referrals for their primary business as well. Perhaps you know someone, perhaps you are that someone. Whatever the case, to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connections franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of this program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.